All right, everybody, and we're live here. Good morning, Brian. Good morning, BJ.
Good
Hello.
morning.
Hi, guys. Um, well, welcome everyone who's joining us. While we get started and introduce ourselves, we're going to take just a little bit to make sure everyone's here and seated and ready for the webinar here. But feel free to let us know where you're joining us from. Go ahead and drop a note in the chat, and I'll call out some of our attendees and see where we're uh, having our attendees come in from. I'll get started. My name's Mike Weber. I'm the community and event manager for Pixelz. And a little bit about Pixelz, if you're not already familiar with us, which I'm sure most of you are. We are a retouching platform that partners with the top brands, e-commerce brands around the world. And we power retouching with our sophisticated AI and deliver industry-leading retouching to our customers. So Brian, I want to throw it over to you. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little about Globaledit?
Yes. Mike, thank you for having me here today, and really excited to be joined alongside BJ. My name is Brian Gavin. I lead Globaledit. We are the leading creative workflow management platform. Like Pixelz, we work alongside brands, technology partners, other studios to help scale content production. And we're located here in New York and are really excited to be having the conversation with everyone that can join us around the world today.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brian. And how about you, BJ? I'll throw it over to you. Can you give us some background on yourself and what you do at Old Navy?
Yeah, hi, I'm BJ Gray, and I am, marketing operations extraordinaire. I've worked in retail for about 15 years, running creative operations and marketing and production. And I'm really happy to be here today to talk about technology and how it can support the teams that are in these departments. And I was brought on to Old Navy, which is a division of Gap, as most of you know. I was brought on to Old Navy to run the marketing operations solely for finding efficiencies and agility while leading 4 different teams who are running the day-to-day work. So I am really honed in on this type of conversation all the time, every day in my everyday life. So
amazing. And that's exactly why we're here today. This is actually the second part of our series on 360 workflows. So we're going to be talking today a little bit more about Old Navy's agile workflows. And before we get into this, I do want to let everyone know that this is all being recorded. So as soon as this webinar is over, you'll receive a recorded copy of this webinar sent to your email. So any of your colleagues that missed it, or if you'd like to share it, rewatch again, you can find that in your email. So I think we've given everyone a chance to come in here. Let's see where we've got our attendees coming in from today. We've got Tony Baker from San Francisco, Nicole from San Diego. We've got some New Yorkers, a couple people from LA, more San Diego, Indianapolis. All right, Midwest represent. And yeah, with that, let's kind of get into our topic of the day. Let's start with you, BJ. Can you tell us a little bit about how your content production teams are organized? Let's talk first about defining the problem of agile workflows, and I think that's a good starting point. How are your teams organized? And I know this is kind of an interesting thing for Old Navy. Can you get into that?
Yeah, because I think the audience can either come from a marketing department or an e-com studio photo production department. And at Old Navy, we are the first brand within the Gap community to combine our marketing editorial team with our e-com studio. When I say combine, I mean that the assets that are shot at the studio for the website are very much usable into our editorial marketing campaigns, or we leverage our own studio for our shoots. So when I think about an ecosystem of tools and agility, I really need to figure out how to combine the fast e-com photo shoot production along with our marketing editorial production, and how those teams, which is really actually one umbrella team over both sides, can leverage the assets quickly, edit the assets, work them through the retouching with Pixelz. Both sides use Pixelz. So I think that it's a little bit different setup for me and my team versus if you have purely an e-com studio and purely a marketing department that does the campaign photo shoots, you might not have the same conundrum I do, which is to make sure that we can leverage quickly and search quickly across both platforms. So the teams that I support are a creative team, obviously, a photo creative team, a post-production team in terms of digital techs, retouching, studio management, and then the project management, obviously, to keep this whole place running. So the project management team works across both sides. But yeah, the first thing is for me, how do we edit, search, leverage images coming off of two types of shoots and get them into the same back-end flow? So mine is slightly different, but it's all relative to post-production, content management, asset management.
And Brian, this is from your experience. I'm sure you see different studios operating in different ways all the time. Can you speak a little bit to BJ's unique situation and what you've seen with your experience?
I would say that the challenge or the problem, I don't think is unique. It's innovative in how the solution is being arrived at, which is, BJ, I think you mentioned something that is at the crux of the problem, which is access to content. Being able to search content inside of these silos is really challenging because your brand team, your social team, your PDP team, those groups may be operating with different needs of how they distribute the content in the end state, but the access to all that content, it's pretty brilliant, but rather simple in terms of just creating that accessibility to content. And Mike, we hit on that concept of when you're staying within flow, when you're in flow of production and you're in flow of marketing production, part of it is that accessibility to content and trying to break down those barriers.
And we're here today because we've actually solved these problems. So through Pixelz, through Globaledit. And BJ, can you talk about like what your old workflows were and what was the problem before the solution? What were the issues that you were facing?
Purely from a marketing editorial campaign shoot, our problem was that we have no system, no software before we implemented Globaledit a year ago. And so we were working, every creative was working in their own way, whether they were taking a hard drive from the shoot and doing all their editing and capture, whether they downloaded their images to their own hard drive and then shared them in a Google Doc or on a Miro. So like there was all of these unsynthesized ways that people were working. And then when you went to like pass the baton to another team, it was messy. The work is, spread out all over the place. And then you add a pandemic onto that, and we're really like scrambling to figure out where people are keeping all their work. It's not in one digital software space. So I think it's probably like many companies out there, the old way of working was to just use go off the hard drive or have hard drive shipped all over the place. And there was no centralized place to work. And with that, the other old workflow issue is that besides lack of connecting the teams is the manual work that goes into and the time it takes to download assets and upload assets and send assets and share assets and then communicate what you're trying to share. Where when you use a tool, a workflow tool like Globaledit, you can do it all within the tool, and it saves time coming off the shoot to editing, to sharing, to retouching, etc. So it just was a very laborious, manual, bespoke way of working that we had. That's for the marketing campaigns. The e-com studio was running a little bit more smoothly, but siphoning themselves all into the website production team, and we have yet, and we're still working on the ability to get those assets over to the marketing team to be able to use them more and not do so much shooting in the marketing editorial campaign. So both had their unique workflows, very manual. And I really think that many tools connected together is going to help make it more streamlined.
So Brian, in these, it kind of sounds like the pandemic served as a forcing function to get a lot of studios into this new mindset of non-siloed workflows. I know you're still having an issue with silos, BJ. Brian, can you talk a little bit about what are some solutions we can apply to fixing that sort of issue? Now that we're in the cloud, now that we're out of hard drives.
Yeah, so I want to just start by, I think the most simple thing that happened as part of the three of us being able to kind of sit at the table today and talk is the problem of content being siloed within the organization was identified as a really, major pain point. And I know a lot of the brands that I have the opportunity and pleasure of speaking with, while processes within the various types of content that is produced is probably deemed efficient, right? As a brand, as a content creator, our content is making it out today, but the overarching pressures of each of the different channels that we're trying to support is growing. And everyone here can probably say, well, we have various pieces of technology that help us within our channel of content production. And the silo of really trying to create 360 awareness of your content production from the get-go is, I think, crucial to being able to elevate the various types of content that we ultimately, by having the right types of technology implemented in the studio or within marketing and design, you're creating this accessibility to the content. And I mentioned that, kind of when you kicked over the first question, but what's interesting in when you try to solve these silos is Pixelz and Globaledit and certainly Old Navy, we were able to really codify the process, right? That's ultimately, we translated business logic, and I don't want to jump to the solution, but we took business logic and we built it into the automation and workflow capabilities of the two tools, and the people alongside were able to kind of navigate their process changes ultimately for the better, because automation is able to kind of put assets in the right place at the right time.
So actually, we've talked about the problem, and these are problems that everyone has had or has experienced. It's the bottlenecks, it's tracking, it's content organization, the silos, always. Let's get into kind of the solutions for these. Actually, Brian, you said we don't want to talk. Let's talk about the solutions. How are we getting out of silos? Let's reframe that actually. So before we're digging into that, because that's still ongoing issues. What would be a starting point? Let's say if we're building a solution from the ground up, how do we get to the beginning of this and start thinking about building an ecosystem of vendors for our solutions?
You have to, I think, start with having measurable goals and initiatives that are focused around efficiency and speed to market. Those metrics about how easily you can move through the production process and more importantly, the utilization of your content. If you don't have those goals in place across the holistic channel of just content production period, it may be difficult to merge these various types of content production together. You're gonna continue to kind of operate in these silos of content production and maybe ultimately feel it's okay. BJ, I'm not sure what your thoughts.
Yeah, I want to build on that a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to build on that because I think, okay, sure, we all have these lofty goals. Like my goal is reduce manual work by 30% this year. Well, how do you really, measure that? And I think it's getting off of things coming down and up off of your desktop and filling in Excel spreadsheets that then pass on to another team or onto a vendor. It's really using the tool to let the asset flow through the tool to the different departments. And so going back to that silo conversation, I feel like there was the creative team, there was the photographer and the creative team that went out and shot the asset. That's one silo. Then they come back and there's the editing team that's going to do all the layouts. They don't realize that that asset needs to now go into retouching. It needs to now go into, which is a whole nother siloed team. They had their very prescribed way of working. And then there goes into the, studio team that's going to publish it. And so I feel like when those teams start to process map out how they work and the pass offs, it's really, really getting granular with how you pass off from one team to another is where that content production is going to stay in a system easier, and you're going to understand where your bottlenecks are, and you're going to understand all the manual work that actually goes on when that asset moves from one team to the next. That's why you have to break down the paradigm of being siloed. You're not just here doing your job in your area. It's going to have to hand off. The next team needs to have it. What information needs to go to that handoff? What steps need to be taken out when we hand off within a tool versus manually? I think that's where you start to find your solution. What solution is going to be able to manage how we work in a less manual way within their tool, but you will never know how to apply that until you process map out the work between the teams and get really granular at the handoff between whether you're handing off between teams or handing off to a vendor, as we do now. We hand off from Globaledit straight to Pixelz. There was a lot of steps that we were doing that we had to really dissect before we could optimize how we use Globaledit or optimize how we connect to Pixelz. So I think, sure, have a goal, 30% less manual work, reducing your pipeline time by 2 weeks. Those are great goals, but to get to the solution, you need to be able to brainstorm, process map, and understand how every siloed team is working and then how they're passing that work along. I mean, I'm getting real granular with how to do it. I also think you should go out and talk to a bunch of companies, because even though we're a large retailer, so is Patagonia, so is Nordstrom, so is Target. We talk to all of those companies about what solutions they're using. And again, they are very unique in their workflow, but one solution, one company might be able to still tailor their software to meet your needs. And you want to find out who's using what software and why it's working for them and why it's not. And so I think talking to people, setting your goals, but then really process mapping is the way you find the solution of how you're going to be able to migrate to a tool versus the manual way of working. And it takes brainstorms, a lot of brainstorms. I'd say 2 months of brainstorming with a vendor, with many vendors if you need, and let them be the masters of how it can work for you. You don't need to figure out how to do it. Let them help you just to identify the pain points.
So I'm going to jump in here, Brian. After kind of doing the process mapping and really realizing where your opportunities are, I know for you, BJ, you had the advantage of having worked with Globaledit in the past. But if you were approaching this from a starting point again, what would be some of the first questions that someone wants to go down this path? What are some of the first questions that they should be asking a vendor like Pixelz or Globaledit when they're trying to make these big paradigm shifts in their company?
I think, and yes, I have worked with Globaledit in the past, in my past career, but this team had not. And so I think the questions we had were, now you see how we work and what we need to do in terms of when we move our images from one place to another, how is your tool going to make it easier for us? Where do you see results from using Globaledit versus the way we think we're doing it now, which is the better way? We need someone to almost convince us that their tool is going to solve XYZ problems that we're having. So I think I would ask, what is your tool set up to accomplish right now, right out of the box? And what do we need to build to add on to the tool to accomplish our unique workflow? Because you can tackle a lot of low-hanging fruit right out of the box with any software and any integration, but then there's unique things that you might need to build. And I think you need to get real honest with what's attainable in the near future and then down the line. So just ask the vendor to constantly educate you on where their tool is going to shore up how you're working.
And Brian, I know like us, you take this similar kind of consultative approach when you're working with your clients. Can you kind of talk about that and what it's like to be an idea and sparring partner with someone like BJ to work out the details?
Absolutely. And one of the pieces that I think our industry of content production, work in progress, content creation, and focusing on the creativity at large is we're in a unique space. I think, that you look around the industry and there's, ultimately you run into a lot of familiar faces, and to be able to be in this space, it comes with working with trusted partners. And Globaledit has the benefit of being born from a content production company, Industrial Color itself, and Pixelz, operating for decades in the aspect of a really specialized area of content production. We're talking about challenges of time between step one and step two, but this is being magnified in the realm of hundreds of thousands of products and pieces of content that are being produced. And so when you bake it down to when this problem is, or this opportunity for improvement is happening hundreds and hundreds of times at the asset level, finding those trusted partners that can focus on those specific challenges. We found, through working with BJ's team, building trust, exemplifying our expertise in how content, comes out of the studio. We were talking about how, the digital tech processes their EIP files out of Capture One. These types of really hands-on, I would say, they're the nerdy parts about content production that we, roll our sleeves up and say, hey, those problems are actually what we can help you solve, and they're unique. And so one thing that we've come to learn is we at Globaledit can't be everything to the creative partner. We can't solve every single aspect of the content production challenge, but we know really specifically where we sit, and we try to go deep in that area and find partners like Pixelz that can take us a leg further for a mutual client like Old Navy, where it's two different pieces of technology, two different challenges together because of the opportunity of how our systems can integrate and talk to one another. We're taking the best in class for the particular area of workflow challenge, putting them together. And I think that stemmed from having the people that understand the creative process, and the technology being capable of saying, okay, right job, right place, we stay within your swim lane, right?
Yeah. I think this gentleman, Peter's asking a question about a case study with art directors, producers, freelance creatives, et cetera, who use Globaledit and PR Pixelz. I think, Peter, I am a use case, a fresh use case of how we're using Globaledit and Pixelz. So there's a front end process that we're trying right now with Globaledit, where we come off a shoot and go straight into Globaledit as our workflow tool for editing, adding our metadata from the shoot, and then using that as the hub for starting our retouching request. That's where the creatives will grab the images they want, shoot them over to the retouching team, use the markup editor, all that, and add their layouts so that the retouchers know where to crop. From there, the operations and production team does the integration and works with Pixelz via the tool. So it does cut down a ton of manual steps for the production team. I feel like the biggest saving in time is going to be on the content production, post-production time, using Globaledit and Pixelz. And it's how we set up the integration to pass off automatically all the information we used to type up manually, and to streamline the information that can be read from Globaledit over to Pixelz, from Pixelz back into Globaledit, so that our retouchers could pick it up and finish the work. So Pixelz really starts all of our retouching, and then we finish it up and do the quality check before it goes into any layout and then gets produced. So I am a use case, and I think it's super easy, and it reduced a few headcount, and it reduced a ton of steps on my team just by integrating these two tools, and it's made it really, really easy, and the quality is fine. No different. The quality hasn't changed. It's just how we pass the information has changed.
Well, BJ, you're kind of the poster child for our next section here, which is overcoming barriers to change. You're obviously doing that consistently, but the question that Peter asked is the right kind of question to be a line of questioning here. It's because change is hard, and it's difficult to know, is my current workflow that seems to work for me okay? And should I just double down and continue down this path? Or should I start asking the questions and figuring out what the right type of change is for my organization? But there are barriers to change. What were some of the difficulties and challenges for you implementing the new workflow and tech stack?
I think the first barrier to change is really of a behavioral behavior change has to happen. And the barrier is that our minds and our jobs don't really have the flexibility to want to do the hard work to make the change. And our jobs we have a lot of, volume and a fast-paced job. And to really think about changing how you're going to get that work done in the middle of keeping the day-to-day work ongoing is really, really hard and really stressful. So I think it takes a total mindset change before you can really open yourself up to trying things, learning fast, failing and trying it again, and having that iterative process when you're when you're really doing something fundamentally large, like changing a workflow process that was manual to a digital workflow. I think you really need to set the teams up first with, it's going to be okay. A total mindset, like change management has to happen before you actually get into the physical change. Build the trust. It's going to feel messy. We're going to be okay. Messy and chaotic is progress. Like that's kind of like my mantra. But I think building trust within my own team, because it was them who really needed to do the heavy lifting of the change, and letting them know that it was more about efficiency and agility and getting closer to the customer, where the customer's needs were, that we needed to push this pipeline and efficiency downstream, letting them know it was more about that versus a capital resource that I was trying to save or money that I was trying to save. Like when I set out to change the tool structure and the tech stack, it was purely for getting closer to the end use customer and how we can be doing this work closer in and meeting the needs of the customer when they had them. So it was less about changing their job and eliminating their job, and more about, we got to just get better of how we're doing the work. So you build that trust, you build that safety, you build the trust that they can try something. We know it's going to feel painful and chaotic. And then you can start to like build a framework around change management into how to like train people and get them onboarded into the new system. But the barrier is first, for sure. We have the best system. We know how we're doing it. A creative has a process, right? They don't want to interrupt their process. They've got all the work is on them to make a really strong campaign or a really strong marketing asset. So for them to shake up how their process is really scary. So I think you just need to like ease people's minds that it's not going to be a bad thing. It's going to be a better thing. So that was the biggest barrier, I think. Shifting the perception of what it's like to change, and it's going to be okay.
Definitely. And Brian, I'm assuming you've had a similar experience with all of your rollouts.
Absolutely. The creative process flow is so important. I think some of the aspects of how we've navigated it, because I think there are various ways, as a solution provider to help try to do that, is we started with Miro boards with the team. It was very iterative and collaborative. I think tools like that today, like even a year ago, were barely, they were barely on board. And now it's like without the ability to collaborate and really show that we understand the problem. Because I think that's a lot of when I am working with partners or prospective partners for the first time, it's about building trust that we understand and can define the problem. And that was something that collaboratively, when you have the right, folks from the organization bought into investing in this, we started with just showing that we could define the problem and that we saw that there was a, potential better way, and going through really basic demos of how do the systems talk together. It wasn't necessarily Old Navy's like end state of workflow of how we've designed the integrations to accommodate the business logic, but this is how Pixelz and Globaledit and other systems such as project management can actually work together. Because I think this is still new for us, right? Like, just like we talked about content being a silo, so are the technologies still. I mean, you're still dealing with a lot of brands who have, monolithic on-prem, very custom proprietary software, and then it's the realm of the day and age of snap and click integration. Is I think I still meet a lot of folks who are almost a little bit intimidated by knowing, well, can we actually integrate these softwares? And it's like, you have to. Like, that's, I don't know, that's like a starting rule of engagement.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think
I think mapping out your action plan to help the barrier of getting over the barrier of change. Like, if you actually use a Miro board or something like that and map out the steps and places you want to change and make an action plan that's like baby steps. So we turned on a certain part of the software first and got everybody used to working on that. And then we're going to turn on another piece and get everybody used to working on that. I think if you take it in baby steps, the change doesn't feel as scary, and you can get customer feedback on each step in real time, internal customer feedback, so that what needs to be tightened up. And then if people see that you're working with them on fine tuning how you use the tool, each section of change that you approach will get better and more accepted. The user acceptance will be a lot easier. So definitely do the mapping, figure out an action plan, and just take it. Don't try to wrap the whole solution into one go live event. Take your go lives in like little increments so that you can build upon changing in a slower way and getting people to buy into it better, because you're reacting to the feedback in each one of those. And back to Brian's point about connecting software, we not only connected Globaledit and Pixelz, but one of our main project management tools is Airtable, and we connected that on the front end. Airtable feeds Globaledit all kind of information for every department, like when it goes from the creative department, from the shoot to the creative department to the retouching department, and then out to Pixelz. Airtable is constantly the one source of truth, feeding information in and out. So you do need to figure out and talk to vendors about how you can connect all your tools. And then, we're going to also be connecting AEM next to our next step will be connecting AEM to this. So I feel like making an action plan that takes the change in steps and where you want to who you want to connect to, like your whole tech stack, is a really nice way to approach any sort of technology solution, implementing a technology solution to your company.
Thanks for mentioning Tex Stack, BJ, because it's kind of the last and final area we want to talk about here. Can we talk about what it means for a large organization like Old Navy to have visibility through their tech stack over what's specifically in this agile workflow that we're talking about with Pixelz and Globaledit, what that tech stack does specifically to our visibility on what's retouched and what's ready to be sent, whether that's a marketing image or an e-com image. I know in your organization it's siloed. What does this tech stack do for your visibility before versus now?
Well, so what it does is it connects the information. So it actually forced us to, one, use our technology more. Like, we pushed harder. Once we knew we could connect Globaledit to Airtable or Globaledit to Pixelz, we actually we're using all of our MarTech tools more, and they're working better for us. And I'm finding that people are going into the tools because the information is being seen across all of the tools naturally through the integrations, versus strategy works in this tool and creative works in this tool, but the information that strategy has over here needs to go into this tool, and the information that goes from creative to retouching and post-production needs to go into this tool, to Pixelz, whatever. So I feel like what it's done, a tech stack, a real sophisticated integrated tech stack, has let people put more information in that's usable and digestible in one area versus everyone going in and out of all the different tools and not using them to the fullest because they still feel like it's easier and quicker to write something on their desktop and put it into this tool. Now the information is starting in a really strong way in one tool and feeding the next tool and then feeding the next tool. So Airtable feeds a ton of information before it goes to Pixelz. Although the offshoot is going through Globaledit, we're grabbing information from Airtable first before we shoot it over to Pixelz. So I feel like stacking all of these technologies is making it so much more productive for everybody to see what's happening project wide, I guess. So it's just the information is just so much more accessible when you stack them together and when you integrate them and when you use all of your tools to the fullest.
Brian, I feel like you want to jump in and say something here.
You kicked off with just mentioning kind of it's almost the process that the three of us are kind of formulated around, which is it's been very agile. We learned so much once we kicked off phase one, and BJ, you actually kept us grounded to say, guys, we're gonna see how phase one operates, right, until we move off of it. And from a development and integration and process flow, I mean, the whole nature of how Pixelz and Globaledit and the creative teams, the marketing teams, it's been a very agile and iterative process. We haven't just said, okay, we're defining everything from A to Z in the beginning, and that's what we're going to go out and act on. It was iterative over time, and I mean, it moved pretty quickly, but I think that learning experience for everyone here is, while you may know what the end game is, how you get there may need to be altered and defined based upon, we've learned so much. Just, okay, we kicked off the retouching going to Pixelz. What did we learn as those types of automations came about? And the other thing I was going to mention, which is really unique, because I know we talk about, okay, when the process itself isn't having to be managed, creatives can, go deeper into their ultimate deliverables. But we've also seen that the roles and the team members, the creatives that are partnering in Globaledit or Pixelz and Airtable actually can think about process optimization themselves. Because now that you get them out of like the low-hanging fruit, which is a lot of what we did, it's brought about a whole new kind of conversation about, well, what's next? So I think it changes how we think when you're not just in the day-to-day managing, did my update of markups get copy and pasted from this system to that? It's like the flow of information is now just expected. Now we can talk about more systemic and scalable challenges around how am I going to deliver more next quarter with the same size team, right? Those types of scalability challenges can then be something you really start to think about and have fun.
Well, I think for us, just exactly what you said, like once we realized these tools could talk to each other, we moved off of like that basic need. And now we're like, what else can the tool do for us if we put this information in? And then the other thing is now connecting our ecom studio, having these tools talk to each other and images coming back into Globaledit in a new way from the ecom studio is going to show us what's already been shot, and we don't need to go shoot it again. Or we can pick up this image or style it differently or whatever it is. Like we have so much more visibility to streamline another part of the business and find efficiencies now that these technologies are like connected. You can keep pushing on. Don't just stop. Don't just turn them on and say, okay, we did it. I mean, like you said, your juices just get flowing of how much more there is to optimize. I think of it like simplify makes you agile makes you more efficient makes you go faster, and faster gets you closer to the customer. Like, I mean, you got to like really have like a clear plan for why you're constantly doing this. Like that just kind of goes through my brain. I need to simplify how we do the work so we can become more agile, so we can be more efficient. And, I mean, it just goes on and on. Like, I just feel like that's always running through my brain, no matter where I'm at with a tool or an implementation or a connection or an integration. I still want to think about pushing it further and further. And we've done all of this in less than a year.
Yeah.
And I think that's
It's huge
interesting.
for technology implementation. Some technology takes like 3 years.
Well, you're implementing so much too. So that's a lot of implementations compacting to a short time. And I think the interesting thing about how we're connecting these components together, they almost get more robust. I mean, they're robust out of the box, but they get more robust as the deeper you get into it. It's you can accomplish things that you could never dream of if this was an internal tool, simply because you're leveraging like the dev teams of masters who are doing this for the leaders of our industry.
Yeah. I definitely think, clients make the tools better for sure, or push the tools to a better place, as well as the tools push us to a more robust workflow. So I think it's a compliment for both sides to partner, because we can push your tool to work hard, to be developed differently, because you can now see the intricacies of how we work or what we need, and we can use your tools to make us be more fluid and robust as well in how we do the work. So it's like such a great win-win when you have a software service teams like this.
Brian, I know you're all about the iterative and evolving tech stack.
Absolutely. I mean, it comes with, we as a technology provider, need to stay grounded to where our boundaries are, and try to continually optimize within those areas. And like BJ mentioned, there were, specific parts about how Pixelz and Globaledit can optimize the exchange of data or the exchange of content that, we've been able to kind of innovate on our platform because of how a brand, Old Navy, and a technology partner like Pixelz. And it's really interesting when you get in that space of being able to, have those type of collaborations. And and at the scale that, I think for everyone that's here, I don't think we're talking about anything groundbreaking in terms of the challenges that these organizations have, but how we've pushed one another to ultimately solve these challenges, and also have a collaborative back and forth about, hey, how do we solve these challenges? I think that's important.
And we're actually nearing the end of this webinar, so I want to remind everyone, if you do have any questions, we answered Peter's, but if you do have any questions right now, please jump in that chat and go ahead and dump them in there, and we'll get to them right away. But in closing, I will come back to questions. Brian, is there anything else that you want to add, or BJ, before we start jumping into some questions here? I think this has been a really interesting dive, BJ, into what you've done at Old Navy, and it's just exciting to hear how far you've come.
Yeah, it's been a ride. It's been a wild ride. I think for me, closing statements would be map out what you really need to put into a software tool to make it easier for your teams to do the work, and the action plan has to start with some low-hanging fruit, baby steps, and celebrate those wins. Really celebrate the wins before you move on to the bigger stuff, so that the teams feel good about the change that's happening, and then take on some harder integrations, and what information do you need to talk to each other, and what tools can you connect so that information flows easier from one to another. And constantly listen to your internal customers and your team for feedback on what they're seeing, what they're feeling, what they like and don't like with what you're changing, and take that into account so that you build that safety and trust with them. But really, like, your customer, your internal customers, who you're really trying to please as well. And so seek feedback often about what you're implementing. That's what I would say to make it a successful venture.
I love that. It's important. Brian, anything else from you?
Have an owner of this and these types of initiatives. It's been very helpful within the organizations that we partner with, and specifically with Old Navy, where this is a center of excellence that was chosen to be invested in because of this known efficiency that it can create. And without those types of owners, I think it's going to be challenging to realize all of the gains you could, and demand that those content silos be broken down, because the efficiencies that can happen within, and the expectation that BJ has of her technology partners is that it's inherent in the solution. So I think those same expectations can be set no matter how big of an organization you are or what you have currently in your technology stack.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah, you got to have someone to champion the business case.
Absolutely. This was has been a really great talk, Brian and BJ. Thanks for joining us today. And before we sign off, I just want to say also thank you to everyone else for joining us. This was again our part 2 of our webinar series with Globaledit. So if you didn't catch the first one, you can find that at pixelz.com/webinars. And this is part of our ongoing mission to open up conversations with industry professionals. And on that note, I also want to let everyone know that we're hosting our next live event in New York on May 5th. That'll be Flow, New York. Hopefully I'll see Brian and BJ there, and anyone else who's joining us today. You can check it out on our website under live events. So again, thank you. Big thank you to BJ and Brian for joining us today. And
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
thank you both. It's been a real pleasure. Great conversation today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.